We've got an early Christmas present here today, Jim.
We do. Eric Mambuelo. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, you're our friend. You head up Cowboy Home-Based Care. Cowboy is sort of in central Zambia.
Yeah.
And we've been working together now for a few years. We do pastors' conferences together. We're involved in the home-based care program that you head up through the agency of local churches, education of orphans, food support, all kinds of terrific things that are being accomplished there.
And I apologize that for the first time in recorded history, we don't have snow yet.
That's the only
but
bad
we're
thing.
working on it.
I was looking forward to see the snow. How do I come to Canada and then I don't see the snow?
Yeah, well, no, it's very disappointing.
Yeah.
But it's cold enough for you, right? I mean,
Oh, very cold. We don't get this cold in Africa.
No. And this is your first time away from Africa.
It's my first time outside Africa.
What are your impressions so far?
Well, this is an excellent, it's just another world.
Yeah.
And you cannot compare it with Africa.
No.
The two are totally different.
Yeah, it's like two different planets in many ways.
Obviously, yes.
Yeah, it's almost like you do space travel. You fly from the Africa planet to the Canada planet, and really, I mean, I go through the same kind of culture shock in reverse when I go to Africa.
Yeah.
And but the fact is, we're all part of the same family.
Yeah.
Eric, tell us about your work and how you got involved in this work.
Well, I think I must begin by saying that in 1987, I worked with World Health Organization on blood transfusion services in Zambia. So my job was to go out there in the communities, in institutions, to collect blood samples and test them for HIV, hepatitis, and other pathogens or organisms. It was very alarming at that time because most of the blood samples I collected were HIV positive. They were already infected. And we were getting these blood samples from people between the ages of 18 to 45. That meant that most of these people were infected, were in their prime ages. Now that was very alarming. Now I didn't know that the Lord was actually exposing me to what he was going to do in my life in future. So I thought it was just a job with World Health Organization. And in 1995, the Lord began to impress upon my heart that I needed to go into full-time. Now my call was twofold. First of all, that I was to go into full-time pastoral work, and secondly, that the Lord was calling me into a community worker to respond to the HIV/AIDS pandemic. And also that the Lord gave me the mandate to mobilize the local church to get involved in the fight against HIV/AIDS and the mitigation of the same.
Now, had you at this point, Eric, had HIV touch your own family?
Yes, of course. And when I talk about HIV, it's some kind of a personal issue for me because I've been affected. For me, HIV is not just about statistics. It's not about strategies. It has affected me. In 2000, I lost my sister-in-law that was a wife to my young brother. So the wife began to have a chronic cough, and later on it was discovered that that chronic cough was actually tuberculosis. And then her condition really deteriorated very fast to an extent that you can literally count the bones, the ribs. And she was a mother of two boys, and she was 24 years old. Her name was Josephine. So we talked to her. I personally talked to her about the need to take an HIV test. She was not willing because at that time, if any person tested positive, he was considered to be an outcast. And on the other hand, at that time, the church was preaching hellfire. Any person that was HIV positive was considered to be a sinner, and they looked at HIV as a plague from God.
A judgment of God.
Yes, God was judging those who were HIV positive. And so my sister-in-law was not ready to take the test. Anyway, she died. A few weeks later, my young brother, 28 years old, began to cough, and again it was TB. His condition deteriorated very fast, and it was discovered he was HIV positive.
You nursed both of these people.
Yes. Unfortunately, he also died, my young brother. So they left 2 boys. At the moment, as I speak to you, I'm keeping one of them. And then thereafter, we had my elder sister lost the husband again to HIV/AIDS, due to HIV/AIDS. So you can see that I was moving from funeral to funeral. And HIV is quite personal to me because it has robbed me of my dear ones, my family members, and some friends, some church mates, and so on. So every week I was at the graveyard. And you should see how, before we lower this casket, how the orphans and the widows grieve because they have lost a breadwinner. So that's how terrible it is. So for me as a pastor, it's not even easy. Of course, I'm a pastor, so I bury so many people every week. For me to say ashes to ashes and
dust to dust.
Dust to dust, I know in that casket, in that box, is a friend, is a relative. And for me to do that, I find it very difficult.
Eric, you mentioned the stigma attached to HIV, and this has been one of the issues that has been almost insurmountable. I remember when we started 10 years ago, I would stand in front of a congregation and I'd be the first pastor in the history of their church to bring this issue, to their attention from the pulpit. Because as you said, people didn't want to acknowledge that they had any kind of sexual issues.
They would say, in fact, that they died after a very long illness.
Well, yeah, and the illness is there. It's an opportunistic infection because HIV has robbed them of their immune system. Yeah. That's the deadly reality of HIV. But have you noticed in the last 10 years, Eric, from your perspective on the ground, any shift? Is the stigma still as great as it was then?
The stigma is still there, but of course there's been an improvement. I'll just give me back to the story. When my young brother died, when my sister-in-law died, when all these people died, it was clear they died of HIV. But when people are talking about their death, normally they will say after a long illness. They died after a long illness, but they will not talk about that illness because it was a taboo and there was this stigma attached to it. At the moment as I speak, there's been some improvement. We've seen people come out and they are freely, openly talking about their status. So yes, there's been an improvement. Much needs to be done, though.
Yeah, really. Now, Cowboy Home-Based Care, we've got some footage, but before we go to that, just kind of give us a brief overview of what you're currently doing with Cowboy Home-Based Care.
Okay, so we are responding to the HIV crisis. So our target groups are those people living with HIV/AIDS, and then we have the orphans, children that have been orphaned because of the HIV/AIDS, and then we have the women that have been widowed because of the HIV/AIDS. So we have 3 special groups. So I think that for the orphans, we do provide education and supply school supplies. And for the widows, we empower them with skills, but also we do some income generation. And for those who are living with HIV/AIDS, the patients, we do the home-based care. So every week, so every week we go out in the communities to visit them, to encourage them, to help them with practical work.
Now let's just kind of take a look here at some of. I'll sort of walk you through this. Here's a typical welcome when you're coming into a community. They know you're coming and they want to welcome you. I'll tell you, I've never felt so welcome in my life as in Africa. I mean, how do you handle that? I mean, how special is that? I mean, they really mean it, for one thing.
This is Katondo.
That's Katondo, And there you are, Eric. You're speaking to a group here. In fact, I think we have some sound on tape here. Let's listen to you.